All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's breakfast event in partnership with X15. I'm Ian Gardner. I'm one of the co-founders at Innovation Bay. So if you don't know us, we think, the longest running community group for tech startups and investors in Australia. We've been going since 2003, so I think we're fairly safe with that statement. Our mission is to support founders on their journey from idea to IPO and beyond. We run events and programs across Australia. We're doing pretty much all of them online. In fact, all of them online now. They're focused on helping our 5,000 plus community of founders, people working in startups, investors and others. You know, it's all about learning, connecting and growing. So if you're not a member, please do sign up at innovationbay.com. I really want to say thank you to the X15 team. It's been fantastic working with them. We've been working with them on this event. So I'm about to hand over to Toby Norton-Smith, who is X15's Managing Director, and he's going to kick off this morning's proceedings. So maybe just quickly, before I do that, just about how this morning's going to work. So as I said, I'll hand to Toby. Toby's going to give us a little talk about X15, intro the team and some of the portfolio that they've already working with. And then we're going to take Q&A from the audience. So yeah, the Q&A feature is at the bottom of the screen. So yeah, jump in there, ask some questions. The chat function is also running, so feel free to go there. So Toby, I think it's time I can hand over to you. So yeah, thanks for doing this and welcome along.
Fantastic, Ian. My absolute pleasure. Good morning, all. It looks like it's another cracking day out there. So I wish I could have been there in person with a bacon and egg roll and doing this all face to face, but this is a pretty decent fallback plan. So thanks, Ian, for this opportunity. I think, I hope you'll all see in the next hour how, really central to our purpose and the operating model we've set up, external engagement with entrepreneurs, with talent, with ventures, is going to be to our success, in our opinion. And so, preemptively, thank you for all the time and interest for those that have made the effort to attend. And I really hope it's going to lead to some excellent opportunities. So, I'm going to give you, just as Ian mentioned, I'll give you about 5 minutes on X15 overall, and then I thought the most effective way to bring it all to life for you would actually be to introduce you to two of the MDs who have already launched ventures through X15. We'll hear a little bit about what they're building, and then we'll move into Q&A for the majority of the time. And I want to start, though, with another X15 vehicle. This is the X15 rocket-propelled test aircraft, which for over a decade underpinned NASA's Apollo program. It's a bit of a marvel of engineering. It's over half a century old now. It's still flown higher and faster than any aircraft since. And for those space geeks out there, and I suspect there's probably a few more than statistical average in this audience, it was the plane that many of the astronauts like Neil Armstrong actually earned their astronauts' wings in. Long before they got in the shuttle. And the reason I wanted to tell you about that is not just because I'm also a space geek, but because that's sort of partly the reason for which we chose the name X15, because not many people have actually heard of this ship, but it was this sort of tremendously powerful workhorse that launched, a really great period of exploration. But what we know about is the vehicles and the shuttles that were launched. And our team, when we were forming up X15, thought that was a pretty cool story. That ultimately, while we're talking about X15 a bit today, ultimately we're going to be all about the ventures that we launch. And so we like this idea of us being there in the background. Yeah, a neat little add-on to that is that this ship only did what it could do because it had the support of a really significant partner. In its case, it was sort of lifted up to the edge of space by a B-52. And then sort of released. You may have seen some of the footage of it, and for us in X15, that sort of big brother support comes from CBA. So that's a little bit on our background. From there, it was actually, as with all naming, a bit of a happy coincidence that we worked out that CBA actually has 15 million customers, both consumers and businesses in Australia, which sort of is a big part of our value proposition at X15. And so nailed the name. I think some Smart Alec, the day after we settled it, reminded us that the X15 had a very unenviable track record of fatal accidents. But on reflection, that only makes sense in an innovation and venturing story. Let's just hope none of those failures are completely fatal. So a little bit to our purpose. Ultimately, it's to bring brilliant new Australian digital ventures to scale. But you can read the purpose for yourself there, but it really, to me, speaks to a belief that there can be a better way of doing this, particularly a better way of doing the right partnership between enterprise and startup. For CBA, very clearly, this is a recognition that they've got tremendous assets, its app and technology overall being probably what you'd call that. But they're recognizing that they can't do this alone. If they want to build a broader set of services, they need to tap into different types of talent, existing ventures, and different mindsets as well. Which is what we're going to be all about. So what does that make us? From the best of maybe a difficult set of names to choose from, we're calling ourselves a venture builder. What that helps clarify is that we're not a corporate VC. We won't be making minority investments in ventures. And we're also not an accelerator or an incubator with a more sort of time-bound approach to how we do things. What we're about is providing both the funding, but also the hands-on support through every stage of a venture's growth. Behind that, there's obviously a lot more detail than this, but three broad pillars to how we are going about our work. The first is that every venture will have guardrails and support to ensure that they can build with world-class resilience, security, and compliance outcomes. But at the same time, get as close as possible, and it won't be all the way, to the agility of their natural competitor set. Now, there's a bit of a trade-off in that choice, of course, being agile and safe. But we're doing that so that we can realize pillar number two, which is so central to why we feel we've got a right to play and have a crack in this space, which is being able to leverage CBA's assets. We can talk more about some of the ventures and what they're doing with CBA in the Q&A. Then ultimately, I think even if we do one and two really well, without three in place, we're not going to succeed, because three is where we recognize that, while X15 was initiated by CBA, even from its initiation, we've got two enterprise partners with us, Microsoft and KPMG. We've already got some entrepreneurs working with us, but we need a lot more, and we need to have more conversations with ventures, which is why, today is such an important sort of next step for us in introducing ourselves to this community. I'll blast quickly through this because I think sometimes will make more sense in Q&A in terms of our mandate and focus areas at a very broad level. Two focus areas. The first being what we're calling natural extensions. Other people might think of them as adjacencies. The classic example of this would be the home buying space or home ownership space, where no one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm really keen to go and get a mortgage. Someone wakes up and says, I'm dreaming about owning my own home or moving home. And there's a whole series of services that can be delivered in that journey, and a mortgage is only one of them. And in fact, Steve and Tim will talk later to one service we've already launched in that space called Home In. The other space is what we're calling potential disruptors. This is where we'll look to have a crack at reimagining financial services. In some cases, this will compete directly with CBA. In other cases, I think we'll offer services that CBA can't offer, as well as potentially we could, so sort of new types of services. There's something I'm really excited about in the pipeline but can't yet talk about in that space. In terms of sort of how we then think about our investment criteria, at a very high level, we've got some threshold questions. There's obviously a lot more behind that. I think question 3 is the one where we spend, a lot of time sifting opportunities, which is getting really, really crisp on the benefit that X15 or CommBank can offer to that concept or that inbound venture opportunity. Because I think if we can't find that, we don't believe actually we're the best best vehicle or the best set of people to be delivering that. We've really got to find that opportunity. And I think the emphasis I'd make is it's not just that the venture or the passionate founder thinks that there's a way to leverage CBA's assets. It's actually got to make sense from a customer or a consumer perspective, is really the litmus test for us there. We've got four thematics that our portfolio teams sort of cluster around. I won't run through each one now. I think, there's an opportunity to take this back later. But, maybe three things that they all have in common that I'd call out. The first is that they're sort of undeniably focused on social, economic, demographic themes that, we think are really important to get ahead of or help contribute to. The second is that you can sort of see in the flavor of how we've written them up that we are sort of indexing on more customer facing opportunities, be that consumer or businesses. Clearly one of the big advantages CBA lends is its scale and reach. And the third thing common to each of those themes is I think when you look at them, you can see why CBA as a partner of X15 thinks it's got an opportunity to help in each of those. If I pick the first theme, home and housing, clearly it sort of goes without saying the CBA has got a big role in that space in the community. But even the last thing there, the scale of reach CBA has and the efforts it already undertakes to authenticate all sorts of customer identity and data, is a really interesting starting point for lots of opportunities. So how are we thinking about success? What are our objectives? We've announced sort of 3 5-year objectives. If I was cynical, I'd suspect some of these will, more detail will be provided in the future by my investment committee. But, when we first launched, we had a conversation around sort of 3 broad objectives. The first was proving that we can actually do what we're saying we're doing, which is launch safe ventures that can be connected to a corporate, at orders of magnitude quicker than we would otherwise do. And, CBA and, even in my experience at CBA, we've done this before. We've launched ventures, but not with a vehicle to support us like this. So, we thought it was reasonable to assume that we'd get at least 25 ventures out the door in the first 5 years. The second big measure was scale and impact. Number of customers served is obviously an imperfect measure, particularly for some of our business opportunities we're exploring, but it's a starting point. And then finally, return. And when we talk about return, clearly, we're not a VC fund. It won't be a simple calculation. There won't always be liquidity events for some of those ventures, but certainly each individual venture in our portfolio is keeping a track of both their viability, and ultimately we'll be looking for a few of those ventures to generate significant enterprise value. All of those are the things that keep us excited, our team focused, and the venture leads, who you'll meet in a second. It would be fair to say that I think CBA's objectives, if you're thinking about why they're doing this, are more those ones that I brought up now below the line against each of those. Those ventures should define new types of capabilities and services. In fact, we're already seeing it. Some of the portfolio companies that are building now, as they're making procurement choices, they're really pushing the boundaries of the sorts of enterprise software and SaaS solutions that should be used, and that's sparking really interesting conversations back in the bank. From a customer perspective, there's clearly a belief that if you can have a network of related services, that's a great outcome for customers that speak really well together. And ultimately CBA is not in this for equity returns, but I think the diversification of their strategy and, potentially revenue base is a good thing. So I'm going to pause at that point because I think, that's a very high level overview of X15, but I think to bring that to life, it would be really helpful to introduce 2 of our venture MDs. So I'm just going to check that works. I can see Elliot's come online and there's Stephen.
Hey, Toby.
Morning, guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Morning, Toby.
Pretty well. Let's crack into it, guys. Elliot, I might start with you for no other reason than alphabetically first. Elliot, could you give everyone in the audience a bit of a sense of, where you've come from, how you ended up becoming MD of Adventure, and then, what have you built? What's the product and how's it going?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked in and around the tech startup or fintech space for quite some time. Kind of my first, if I cast back to my first crack at running a business or founding a startup, a very long-term friend of mine and I started our own tech startup called ScribblePix, or later, which we exited to Qantas Postcards. Peter Brad, who most of you probably, a lot of this audience probably know. So yeah, that was probably my first real kind of introduction to the technology and tech startup space, and what some of the challenges and opportunities and excitement of running a tech startup. In terms of the closeness that I've had to CBA and the fintech space more recently, it's been through leading our fintech engagement and innovation engagement on CBA side, and of course ultimately leading me to running and watching Vonto. A quick piece on Vonto. We are essentially a data analytics platform. Our business model works by integrating and aggregating data across the suite of SaaS products for small business. That includes cloud accounting like Xero, e-commerce like Shopify, Google Analytics, Facebook, etc. And we run powerful analytics to generate really meaningful, personalized insights for small business owners. Our mission is to help small business owners be successful, and we do that by using their data or unlocking the value in their data to help them make way better data-driven decisions quicker.
Feels like a pretty valuable time to be leaning into.
Super relevant right now. Super relevant in the current context.
Might shift to you, Stephen. Sort of similar questions, but I know you've got a different story. Would love to just hear a bit about you, how you got to being the MD of HomeIn, and then HomeIn. That's also live and serving customers. How's that going?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, a bit on background. So, spent a little bit of time at CBA and sort of 10 years in management consulting before that. But quite a long background in technology. So I actually grew up in a sort of startup cliche, if you will. My dad sort of founded and exited 3 sort of data and software businesses when I was a kid through the kind of late 80s, early 90s. So he got me into coding and technology from a pretty early age, and I've really enjoyed that. So a lot of exposure early. And yeah, I think from my perspective, I think the HomeIn was a kind of natural extension of that kind of technology background. And I never really understood quite how challenging that home buying experience was till I went through it myself for the first time. And I think just, pumped now about the opportunity to build something that can help others go through that in a, hopefully a less painful and stressful way. So, look, I mean, you mentioned HomeIn earlier. I think really from a customer perspective, HomeIn is designed to support customers through that home buying journey. In the end, the customer wants to buy a home. It's a big decision. It's probably one of the biggest financial decisions a lot of customers make. And we believe they shouldn't have to be worrying about all the other things they need to deal with. So getting a lawyer for your conveyancing, organizing building and pests, et cetera, et cetera. So what we built is basically a customer app, which essentially creates for each customer based on that customer and the property they're looking at, a digital guide that takes them through all the way from sort of the search phase through to settlement. Both from hey, what needs to be done and who needs to do it, but also from getting access to those services we talked about. So if we take conveyancing, for example, digital conveyancing available in the app. When a customer finds a property they like, they add it in the app, request a contract review, they can get their advice back and so on. So they can go through that whole journey in the app. From a service provider view, HomeIn's more than just an app. In the background, we've got a platform that enables the various service providers to actually use that workflow system to easily offer their services to customers. So you can imagine from a customer's perspective, there's the home loan in there, there's the conveyancing, and essentially from there building out all of those other services that they'd need for that home buying journey. I think importantly as well, from a home loan provider perspective, the beauty here is also much better engagement with that customer. you might have seen, for those who have had a bit of a look, there's some screenshots of the app. In the app, we show customers their team so they can see who is their home lender, who is their lawyer, and so on. And so it brings all of those people together. So from a home loan provider perspective, the ability to really support the customer through that journey as well, and give them, I guess, a closer link, rather than just, hey, let's get your home loan up front, and then, hey, when you exchange, let's go there. Creates a much better rounded home buying experience. So,
okay.
Yeah, no, we're pretty excited about that.
And Timsy, you can see your team in the app, but presumably you don't actually have to touch any of them.
No, it's very, yes. It's a non-contact connection, that one.
Including the, I think, the right down to the e-signature and the completion of your sort of legal documents. No need to go to the post office, which certainly I found pretty cool when I used it last year, and that was pre-COVID. We might keep moving. Elliot, would love for you just to sort of dig into, a lot of people are still going to be wondering, what's it like inside X15? It's a bit of a sort of corporate venture builder. Could you compare and contrast startup life first time around with working in X15? What's better, what's worse? Lay it all on the table, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and that is absolutely the apprehension that I had. No doubt, your ability to move at pace in the outside world is the biggest advantage of being in the outside world. And I guess your ability to stay super centric and focused on the customer and the value proposition and how your product is solving that. The obvious constraint or expectation going into launching a venture inside a corporate or with the help of a corporate is the constraints around risk and compliance and all the things that you would expect to be the case, and are absolutely reasonable given the customers that we're able to talk to. Not least of which being a data business, there's such high sensitivity and importance around good data governance and security. But so that was probably my big concern. My experience and the experience of the team has absolutely been net positive around that. I think kind of not least of which is just how hands-on the X15 team are in almost kind of removing that kind of red tape in a sense from our team. Not kind of abdicating it, but like allowing us to just keep really focused on developing our proposition, on our customer. Right now that's more valuable than ever given COVID. It's launching a startup in February, and then having the COVID crisis hit. Of course, there's heightened pressure and the need for us to be able to keep really focused on the customer and lean into our product roadmap and technology development is critical. So that's been a great experience. I think kind of the other thing, and again, not least of which is the funding. Not just the fact that we get good funding and then our kind of cap table is relatively long term in the view, and from that point of view, we aren't facing, we've got good runway in a sense, and have the support of a long term view in the organisation and our investors. So that is of high relief. And then kind of bring it to life.
But I mean, I think it would be helpful for people to understand you've still got runway, right? The runway ends at some point.
The runway ends, of course. Yeah, the runway ends. We're like anything. We've got milestones, and we've got deliverables that we need to prove as we scale. There's no doubting that. However, I think our investor has a longer term view, which is good, and a strategic view, and probably great context of the current climate in terms of how it is impacting businesses. Firsthand, CBA is wearing the brunt of supporting so many businesses. So it's kind of very contextual. The other piece that has been a huge win for us, Toby, has been just kind of getting access to the strategic partners. For us, it's been Microsoft in particular. Getting access to some high quality capability and technology support to help us accelerate across some really complicated data science capability, and looking at how leading edge artificial intelligence to accelerate our capability and proposition for customers. That type of access to capability for a startup in the normal environment is probably kind of not even available. Yeah. And then I don't even need to say that we get to touch 800,000 odd small business customers through the X15 relationship. But yeah, so net positive. It's been a great experience. I was cautious coming into it. I thought that there would be the higher risk of us trying to do something at pace and quickly with freedom to a sense. I think
it's fair to say you've got a few more grey hairs in that beard of yours, Elliot. Like, it hasn't all been smooth sailing.
Can you see them? Yeah.
Definitely can, more than 6 months ago.
I
might shift to pleasure anytime. Timsy, you're clean shaven. That's great. Stephen, you've had a very different journey. Just for to clarify for those on the call, Home-In, unlike Vonto, which was conceived and launched all through X15, Home-In was a corporate project that our investment committee saw a pitch around turning it into a venture and supported. Timsy, can you sort of, like, from the other side, we'll have some people on the line who are more entrepreneurs, if you like, or interested. I'd still love to hear your alternative experience and what again, like, lay it all on the table. You don't need to make me happy. What have been the good bits? What have been the bad bits about sort of transitioning into X15?
Yeah, sure. Look, as you said, I mean, we originally tried to sort of stand this up as a venture in CBA proper, and while there's conceptual support for it, the sort of construct, so treating it like a project, kind of was a little bit challenging. Obviously, the benefits of being in X15 really, I mean, probably two key ones that stand out for me. The first one is really around sort of, I guess, cultural mindset. We really thought of as a small business, as a venture now, which is great. To have that mindset, but still have access and into the sort of the CBA from a distribution point of view and the CBA customers is a really kind of amazing balance. So, and even going through, our launch recently and the rebranding and so on, and being able to get that and the support on the back of the X15 launch and corporate support for that, as well as the excitement around a new business, I think was a really great balance.
What about the flip side? Do you get nervous now about having runway? I won't reveal what it is, but the clock ticks, and then you either come back to the investment committee and successfully make the case, or you're looking for other sources of funding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Change the mindset of the team?
Yeah, I think so. I think for sure. And that was probably links nicely into the second thing, which is this idea of like, we've now got the right constructs in place. So and the appropriate ones for what we're trying to do. So like you said, around funding, being able to get some clear runway around funding, but also knowing that, that funding ends at a certain point and there's key milestones that we need to be hitting and targets that we need to be hitting to convince the investment group around, hey, this is worthwhile to keep going with. So I think that's been really good. The other thing in terms of sort of constructs is how we link back into the main CBA business. Like, CBA is a big organization, and actually I thought I saw a question just before on the chat around how the ventures are going to be linked into the core business lines of CBA. And so while it's still sort of in its infancy and maturing, I think the support as an MD that I'm getting from X15 around access into those core business lines is really beneficial. So like I said, it's early days around that, but I can see that being super helpful for us to really focus on delivering a great customer proposition and what we're trying to do there, and then getting that support and being able to link in from a CBA sort of core business line perspective.
And maybe for the audience, just to keep it quick, you've already got, a pilot group of, it's probably quite rare to have CBA as your sort of toehold partner, but you've got a bunch of their lenders already using the product. I think you've just crossed over 100 million in fundings through the platform, which is pretty exciting. But obviously, there's a lot more to go. Mortgage numbers are big.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, just that, as you said, the ability for us to identify a range of different CBA lenders, get this out to their customers, have it live, being able to really test with customers, iterate the proposition as it's going, and then know that that's only a tiny fraction of the potential to then scale us out to access the CBA customers is great.
Guys, I think what we might do now, I think it'd be helpful to open up a bit more. I think, Ian, I know you've got been collating questions that have been coming in both before and now. Maybe we'll open up, and just before we do, I hand to you, Ian, I'd like to introduce two other members of the team, Ish Ko and also Sophie Gilda. I think they're both coming up now. So just for everyone to get a sense of how we work, Elliot and Timsy Stephen, in some sense, arm's length from our core team. Their MDs running their own ventures, accountable for those. I think we've mentioned the word runway and objectives enough for them to feel that. Ish and Sophie sit in our sort of core X15 team, where we play, broadly two roles that have sort of been alluded to in this call. One is taking away a lot of the pain points that a venture would feel if they were partnering with a large corporate, as well as freeing up time for them to focus on effectively just product development and customer. Payroll, accounting, all those sorts of back-end services. But in terms of the red tape aspect, it's challenging issues like procurement and compliance, which in a corporate context, I'm sure there's people on the line who have felt the pain of trying to do business development with any large enterprise, and that's part of what the team does. The other part of the X15 team are the portfolio team, who are looking for new opportunities, who are commencing conversations. Particularly, we've got a bias. We want 80% of our ventures to be led or come from external sources. And that's really where Ish and Sophie's role comes in. Ish heads up two of those themes I showed, and is absolutely consumer focused, so good connections in the retail bank. And Sophie is sort of business, enterprise, government focused, and great connections in business and private banking land, as well as the institutional bank. So I've now introduced them, and Ian, I think we're all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us are good to go for some questions.
All right, awesome. Well, we've got lots of questions, so I'd probably encourage, maybe not round the whole panel, just so Toby, I'll throw them to you, and you can, you'll know your team way better than anyone, so you can distribute them. So the first one came in, most of them came in, by the way, registration, but there's been a few that we'll take from the live chat. So this came in from Jen Huey, but also Roshnan Gadamian asked a similar question. So it's around, you launched just, your timing was good just before the COVID pandemic hit. So the question's, what is the funding appetite in this COVID-19 stage?
Yeah, that's we launched in early February, and I think COVID was just starting to make its way into the news, probably far too late. But frankly, it wasn't even on my radar, or something to be worried about at the time. But to answer the question, and I feel quite confident in the answer, not only because it's my view, but we actually had our last investment committee on Friday, and COVID and our response to that was a bit of a topic of conversation. I'd say two macro thoughts, Ian, and then I may throw to Elliot, who'll give more of a venture lens. X15 is about, like most tech startups, it's about reinventing experiences and business processes, and at core, mostly digitizing them. So we've got to get on with that mission. I think our sense of purpose has just amplified in the last month. Our team have been swarming on opportunities. So I think we feel that that purpose is actually enhanced, not that we'd sort of view it necessarily in that way. And from our investment committee, the funding's still there. And I was also reminded that the goals are still the same. So we're going to keep on cracking. The second message I'd sort of share on COVID, I'm sure there's lots of people with very articulate views on it overall, so I won't go into that. But I've just been talking with the team about being hyper context aware, and I think there's two contexts that are relevant. One is we've been pretty blown away by watching the venture community and the startup community see how hard they're working to survive, to pivot and reimagine their business models. Yeah, and that's exactly what we've asked all of our ventures to do, be it the ones that are still building and the few that are already in market. And Elliot will probably give you some examples of that. The second sort of contextually aware thing that I think we need to do is it would be, naive of me not to think that COVID has changed a little bit the appetite for funding externally. And so, I think that may open up some opportunities for X15, both in sort of, our pitch to external talent and entrepreneurs about the slightly different risk return profile that, we're presenting to ventures and founders within X15, and potentially it accelerates opportunities for us to consider acquisition to get to scale more quickly. So there's sort of my thoughts on COVID. Elliot, I know you've changed your product and your approach in the last month. Did you want to give some color on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of in terms of the funding aspect, we've done 2 rounds, both of which were pre-COVID. We had an A round, a seed round, Toby, and then an A round, and that gives us runway, enough runway to kind of launch and be in market and continue to drive the scale objectives that we're looking at right now. Obviously, things have changed. One of the natural impacts of this is going to be not being able to leverage the CBA relationship as much right now. There's more of a kind of focus on kind of the core support functions for business customers and consumers. So understandably, you kind of we dial that back a little bit. We've absolutely pivoted, not in terms of losing sight of the end business that we want to be running, and we still have a very strong vision around what the value proposition of Vonto is. I think COVID, if anything, accelerates that for us. What we have just done though is really kind of prioritize and double down on the quality and speed of technology build. Is bringing as much of that forward into the current period, probably focusing less on immediate kind of brand build and acquisition in the short term, and kind of not by any stretch avoiding it, just being way more targeted in how we're talking to customers. Those that are contextually engaged right now, people who are looking at their business as a kind of going concern and how they want to get through COVID. But for us, we do have runway. But needless to say, we are going to be going out for another round soon. And we will need to have demonstrated, I've got very clear proof points on the things that we need to prove over the coming quarters, and we haven't lost sight of that. But in saying that, I think the good part is the investment committee has and CBA and X15 broadly have a longer term view for our ventures. It's not kind of a very short term. Input.
Thank you. We might let's do another question then, please.
All right, sure. This one came in from James Stewart. So, hey James, how's it going? Do you work with outside startups? What kind of startups are you looking to work with? So, nice broad question for you.
Yeah, we are, and we want more is the short answer. But I might hand to Ish because she's doing live conversations at the moment. Just to give Ish, would you mind giving maybe more context on how we do that, what we're looking for?
Sure thing. So as you've seen, which Toby's spoken about, our investment mandate is very much about digital solutions in financial services and its adjacencies, which are aligned to our 4 themes. So we do work with external founders and startups from the idea stage through to that pre-Series B, and that's where we believe X15's sweet spot is in terms of the support we provide, be it technology, advice from subject matter experts, risk procurement, etc. So it's important for us that, if we are working with an entrepreneur who's at idea stage, that they are experienced with a track record of delivery in an area of high conviction from an internal sponsor, and to expand a little bit on who we're looking for, Toby mentioned 2 business types: natural extensions and potential disruptors. So to give a bit more color on that, for natural extensions, there needs to be a really strong fit with CBA's existing relationship with customers, be that through banking data, banking products or services, and it needs to be broader than just that a payment's involved in the process. So think less about a dating app, but more about e-conveyancing services, which is a critical part of supporting the home buying journey. And for potential disruptors and reimagining banking, one of the things we look for is less about propositions that replicate what the core bank could or should do. So for example, if it could be executed as a new feature on the CommBank app, it's slightly less interesting to us. But what we're really looking for in disruptive space is a clear innovation, either in business model, in technology, or in the service that's being provided, as well as a proposition that might not necessarily fit CBA's sort of core value proposition to customers. So when we're looking at those things, we'll evaluate based on your typical criteria: value to the customer, value to CBA, standalone, but also either broader value drivers brought back to CBA, such as acquisition, distribution channels, impacts on customer financial well-being, which links well with CBA's purpose. We'll look at the team and the founder and what we think about the ability to win proposition. And last but not least, Toby touched on how X15 and how CBA can add value. So beyond just marketing to a large customer base, what are the other ways in which we can support, whether that's through light integrations and authentication, leveraging institutional client relationships, leveraging balance sheet, other kinds of expertise from the bank that we can bring to a startup. So with those startups, we work with them and support them to seek funding, whether that's at the seed or kind of build phase, through to an internal investment committee, which meets monthly for seed us and bi-monthly for sort of build and scale.
Hey, Isha, I was just pondering while you were talking, maybe dating apps actually do need some reimagining in the current context. I wouldn't rule that out too quickly, but
yeah, I think it's an interesting adjacencies if you're talking about not being able to meet up in person. So
over to you, Ian. Sorry.
Social distance dating. Yeah, sounds good. All right, here's another one. This came in from Samira Ratwanira. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Does X15 limit its focus to fintechs, or do you consider other forms of tech businesses, provided the three questions are answered? Now, you should probably maybe answer what the three questions are and then go on to that question. Excuse me.
Sure. The three questions are the ones I think that I touched on in my, Prezzo, very high level that we put on our website, desirability of the opportunity, the sort of the tailwinds, business model, economically, and then lastly, the really tough one, where is the benefit that X15 or CBA can deliver to that venture? They're the three questions. But I might throw to Sophie. I guess we've given a sense that we're looking broader than fintech, but Soph, did you want to add some color on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Toby. Happy to. I think Ish covered most of this, but we're very interested in fintechs, but we're also looking well beyond fintechs, because the purpose of X15 is to actually find new capabilities and solutions beyond banking. So we certainly don't only talk to fintechs. In fact, we're not looking to invest in core banking products within X15, because that fits better with the CBA group. We are looking, as you mentioned before, at the adjacencies. So those areas where there's a venture which is really complementary to financial services. And so that means that it might have some intersection with our banking services, but it isn't a banking service itself.
Yeah, and so Vonto and HomeIn are good examples of that, right?
Yeah, great examples where, all of the tasks that HomeIn assist you with the home buying journey are not financial services, but they're extremely useful and complementary to the CBA group and what we're trying to achieve for our customers. So really nice fit there. For Strategic Hedge, it's quite different, because they probably are more likely to fit in the fintech space, because we are willing to invest, if we've got really high conviction, in ventures which may directly compete with some of our core banking propositions. But we invest in them because we think that they are interesting under, for example, a different brand, or with a significantly different business model or technology that drives those ventures.
Okay. Over to you.
All right. Yeah, we've got plenty more questions. Some really good ones coming in. Here's one from Sean Dobbin. Hey, Sean. Do founders have equity? Nice and simple.
Yeah, I thought that question would come. I thought it would come sooner. The short answer would be we look at that on a case-by-case basis. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but I should be clear that as a default position for new ideas or new ventures, the default position is no, and I'll touch on why in a second. For existing ventures that are looking for X15 to make a substantial investment in and help scale them, the answer is almost certainly yes. And maybe just to give a little bit more clarity on why for new ventures we've taken a choice that I know, in some cases will go against the orthodoxy, is that if you think about all the conversation we've had on mandate, we don't feel we have a right to play in launching new startup opportunities if we can't get really, really crisp on how CBA and how X15 is going to substantially de-risk the normally very, very high failure rate of those sorts of ventures, and bring significant advantage. So if you apply that mandate to a new venture that we're launching, what it means is much earlier than a normal venture would achieve, we would expect some decent integrations back with CBA And you would expect that some of the levers for value creation in that venture, do sit, while the founder will always be the greatest advocate and will influence every decision, some of those levers will sit with the partner in CBA. And so in that context where we think we've significantly de-risked the venture, but it is intertwined with its sort of scale partner CBA, equity, as I said, we'll still look at it in a case-by-case basis, but equity actually, I think, can lead to complicated and even unfair outcomes. So, for example, we're a founder, CBA is a heavily regulated business, for example, and there may be constraints that CBA places on a business that she or he wouldn't have otherwise expected. So that's sort of, hopefully, to give you some context on why we haven't lightly thought about that as our default position for new ventures. Absolutely every single venture, and Stephen and Elliot know this very well, is incentivized on exclusively the outcomes of their venture. But as a default, we're not going for straight founders equity schemes for new ventures.
All right, cool. Next question is from Andre Brzezinski. Is X15 interested in international banking innovation?
Yes. Short answer would be for two reasons. It's a fast way to validate opportunities. Sometimes we talk about trying to be a bit of a rocket internet of sort of banking opportunities. So if we see an overseas bank and we have good relationships with them that, has an adjacent venture that's working well, and there aren't that many, to be honest, but where we see that, we get a lot of conviction on that. And I think a good example of that, it actually launched before we launched X15, but was the work that we did with Klarna, European fintech, where we identified what they were doing, understood their model, and actually brought them to Australia in a partnership. So that's one reason why, because it helps validate opportunities. The other reason is we'll always start in Australia, but absolutely founders should not feel that they're limited to Australia only. So we'd love to take some of our ventures overseas. I'll avoid any cynical comments about New Zealand, but Elliot, I know Vonto's already launched overseas in New Zealand.
Yeah, I'd definitely avoid cynical comments. Some of my team are Kiwis, Toby, and they wouldn't take to that very well. Yeah, no, we've already launched simultaneously in Australia and New Zealand. That feels very, very natural. But
now, I should clarify, it wasn't a cynical comment about New Zealand, as it was the old problem of, when you sometimes drive to the airport, you're going to New Zealand and you drive to the domestic airport. Does it count?
It's a domestic. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I'm jesting. So New Zealand, obviously, for us, a really like-for-like opportunity to Australia. But our proposition has absolute scale in every market, we believe. There are many paths to Rome internationally for us.
Should we do another question, Ed?
Sure. Now, this has come in from a lot of people, so I'm not going to list them all, but do venture, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but do ventures have to exclusively work with CBA?
No, absolutely not. But Stephen, do you want to give an example of that? I should qualify, natural starting point would be CBA because of the advantages, but absolutely not. Stephen, do you want to maybe bring that to life with Homing?
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, obviously from a Homing perspective, we're super excited about working with CBA and from what we're doing. I mean, you couldn't want a better distribution partner effectively into the home buying business for CBA, 20 plus market share in the home loan space, an amazing brand. So we're super excited about that. But I think to Toby's point, this is our beachhead. This is how we start, and we're already in some quite positive discussions with other home loan providers around offering Home to their home buying customers, and it's certainly a big part of our plan. So.
All right, shall we keep rolling? What makes X15 unique compared to Reinventure and NAB Ventures? And that came in from Justin someone. So Justin.
Justin someone. The first thing that springs to mind is both Reinventure in particular and NAB have been around for, 3 or 5 years longer than us. So credit to them for getting out the door, for sort of animating this conversation around how banks and corporates can think of new ways sort of stimulating this space. So, you know, we've laid out the gates in that sense. I think the flip side of that is it has allowed us to, you know, have a little bit of a think about what we can do a little bit differently, you know, and we're keen to offer a slightly different value proposition out there to founders and entrepreneurs. I think I've touched on it a few times. I think it'd be fair to summarize as saying we think the risk return profile is slightly different, you know, slightly less risk, slightly less return, you know, which won't be for everyone. In fact, it may not be for the majority, but you know, we think it's a proposition that will attract lots of people, and talented people too, who can't necessarily always take the plunge in a sort of pure VC model. So, you know, I can't really speak for Reinventure and NAB because I think everyone is doing more and more of this. But what I would say is, while we launched in February, we'd done over a year's work before that with CBA to get really, really granular on what those integrations and support looked like. And one way of characterizing that is, you know, we were really fortunate to have the CBA CEO launch X15, which is sort of like an endorsement of almost like strategic alignment. But actually what sort of inspires me more is the sort of operational alignment that we've got. So what I mean by that is, you know, the chief procurement officer at CBA has signed off on the way that we approach procurement, and it is very, very different to the way CBA does it because of our unique context and types of, you know, SaaS platforms we use. You know, and I could list 3 or 4 other functions where exactly the same thing has occurred in the last year. So I don't know if that's different. That's certainly where we've been focusing because we think that's what we can do a bit differently. It's this connection to CBA and a slightly different risk return profile for entrepreneurs. All
right, look, we're 8:53, so, you know, probably got time for maybe a couple more, but, you know, quick questions, quick answers. This is kind of the same from 2 people. So Gary Cobain and James Stewart again. So what is the engagement process if you think you fit the criteria for X15? And I guess a follow on from that, how should external companies make contact if they want to pitch with you or work with you?
Ish, do you want to give a short one on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Have a look at the X15. Guys, we've got a front door process. So there's an email info@x15.com.au if you want to get in contact with us. The process is typically, we'll have a look at sort of your brief description of the proposition. Or ask for a pitch deck. We've got a sort of standard format just to make sure that we can adequately assess your proposition. If we like it and we think that it fits within the investment mandate, then we'll set up a series of discussions and go from there. And, you know, I outlined those criteria before. Typically the discussions will go from understanding the proposition through to interactions with internal sponsors to gauge appetite to proceed, and then a pitch through to the investment committee.
All right, that was great. You should have been rotated 90 degrees, but it's not too bad. See if we can squeeze in at least one more. So this came in from Owen Whitford. Are existing companies eligible, and do you look at RegTech as well for the fin services industry?
Sure, yes and yes is the short answer. We have naturally started, we only just launched, we've naturally started with internal opportunities. We do have some entrepreneurs already working and building with us. I think I mentioned my aspiration is that 80% of ventures have either external founders or are actually external ventures that have chosen to take a, you know, controlling or significant investment from X15 so that we can scale and work with them. And we've got a bunch of conversations going on, nothing that I can speak publicly to, although pre X15, you know, I think I mentioned before, Klarna was a good example of that. And RegTech, yes.
All right. Maybe take one more and then see how we're doing in time. This is a big question, so I don't know how you're going to answer this one quickly, Toby, but how will X15 drive innovation more broadly back into CBA? And that's from GB.
Yeah, no, that's doable. I think I'll give a practical example because everyone always talks about sort of this innovation by osmosis, let's do cool things, and the parent gets it. I'm actually seeing that happening already at a really practical level. I'll bring that to life when some of our fintech businesses that we're building at the moment are making procurement decisions, including procurement decisions on SIM CRM systems, core banking platforms, you know, yada, yada, yada. they are engaging with CBA procurement via us, and we're doing it quickly, I should add. And some of the choices they've made have not been necessarily what those teams would have assumed. And that is incredibly rich, that sort of, that innovation on sort of choice of suppliers. As I said, part of innovation is not just cooking up new ideas, it's how you work with others. So, that'd be one example. I could list many others. There are always options for some of these products and services, if they're successful, to potentially be yellow labeled and sort of come back into the parent. But no, absolutely. I think, that's one of the core propositions to CBA of why they're doing this.
Yeah. Okay, we do want to try and finish on time, so I think we'll maybe call the questions there. But thanks to everyone for participating and putting those questions. And Toby and team, awesome work, great answers there. Now, before we wrap up, Toby, I do want to ask you about this Accelerate with an X, which is a cool branding pitch event. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
It's super cheesy branding, let's be honest in it. But Ian, but yes, we're launching a new event called Accelerate. And this is our vehicle for, investing more directly and accelerating a new venture from outside of X15. So we're going to invest $150,000 of seed funding in, at least one winning idea. And what that seed funding will buy is an opportunity for them to build out a prototype and pitch for scale funding. So actually go through the process that we've already set up. We're incredibly excited about doing that on a frequent basis to start bringing to life that 80% number I talked about. But the first event theme that we're launching around Accelerate is one that is, first question we had today is very high in everyone's consciousness right now. And it sits absolutely in Sophie's portfolio. So Sophie, do you want to just give the 2-minute summary of Accelerate number 1 and what we're doing?
Sure, Toby, love to. We're really excited to be launching this. The theme that we're going to have for Accelerate 2020, our first event, is helping micro and small businesses to bounce back from the COVID-19 outbreak. We get thousands of calls a day from small business, and so we're extremely aware of their pain. And we're also conscious this is an incredibly important segment for the economy. Actually, small businesses generate 34% of GDP and employ 44% of all Australians. So hugely important to all of us that this sector is doing well. And we want to make sure they not just survive, but actually thrive in the future. So if you've got an idea, or perhaps if you're an existing startup and you're focused on financial well-being of micro and small businesses, we would love to hear from you. The process will be that you will have the opportunity to pitch for funding from seed in the early stages through to scale funding if milestones are met, plus ongoing support from the X15 team. You'll get access to some senior CBA executives as mentors, and they've got a really diverse set of skills that you can draw upon to enhance your business: legal, cybersecurity, risk, payments, compliance, data science, and many other areas. In addition to that, you'll get to leverage the resources, the global reach, and also the deep expertise of our strategic partners. So that's Microsoft and KPMG, High Growth Ventures. And finally, you'll get the chance to network in a virtual form. Of course, this is 100% no contact. But we're really looking forward to meeting you and to helping you leverage the strengths of CBA via X15. So if you're interested, please register your interest at x15ventures.com.au. And there's further details in the chat as well.
All right, awesome. Look, we have just ticked over 9 o'clock. So look, thank you, Sophie and Toby on that one. Some good stuff there. Look, let me just do a quick wrap. So look, thanks to the panel, Toby, Stephen, Elliot, Ish, Sophie, plus Noni, who's been in the background there. So I think Noni's been answering quite a few questions and posted some links in the chat. So yeah, and thank you, X15. It's been great fun working with you and getting to put this on. So yeah, and I think really educating for all of us. So look, if you've got any more questions or we didn't get to your question, do check out the website, the X15 website, that is. Plus, I think the contact information for the all the X15 team is in the chat. So I know Noni's been posting fervently in there. So lots of links there if you go back and check it out. To all of you, look, thank you for tuning in. We had some really good attendee numbers and participation, so that's fantastic getting that. So it's always great to hang out with the community. So we love doing this, and we love hanging out with you. So look, take care, everyone. And as someone said to me yesterday, stay positive, but remain negative. So we will see you all very soon.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ian. That's been fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone.